Right now.
All right. So, in that case, then, so this is an empathy circle or empathy cafe, part of a project with the Bridging Political Divides through Empathy Circles and Center for a Culture of Empathy. And uh, the topic for tonight is crime and punishment, which Jessica suggested this topic. We've been kind of switching around, picking topics. Um, for me, David, Jessica, whoever comes and suggest things, or the people who are kind of facilitating it. Me and David have been picking topics too. And um, for those who haven't participated in one of these style of empathy circles before, or those who are watching this, we use a specific format to. Um, sorry, I'm a little out of it. Sorry, we use a specific format to let each person get a chance to speak and be heard, which is that someone will pick who they're speaking to. For each time you speak, you'll speak to a specific person. Of course, everyone else is listening silently, but it's like that person is really hearing, receiving what you have to say, and they'll reflect back what you have to say. And then we've been doing like 6 minutes. Like you can speak for up to 6 minutes, although that also includes the person reflecting back what you're saying. And then when you're done, which either at the 6 minute mark or sooner, if you like, I don't have anything else, then it's the next person's turn to pick someone else to speak to, and then it keeps going around like that. And about a quarter to 9, we will stop, or maybe a little later, depending. We'll stop doing like those rounds, and uh, stop the recording, and then restart it to do feedback and closing. And as always, people are free to talk about whatever topic they want. It's just kind of a jumping off point. Crime and you can talk about anything else as well. So let's start by introducing ourselves then. Now that I've done that, I think sometimes we do introductions first. If everyone wants to say their name, where they're from, um, if you want to describe where you sit politically, and your experience with the empathy circles. David, do you want to start?
Sure. My name's David. I've done quite a few of these circles. Me and Megan basically kind of co-founded this Thursday night thing because for me, Saturday morning doesn't really work out because I'm at work. But yeah, I live in San Francisco, and for all intents and purposes, I identify on the right side, on on the right politically, But it's complicated. There's nuances, of course, and we can get into that some other time. But generally, yeah, I can identify as a conservative slash right.
Lauren, would you go next?
Sure. I live in Chico, and I would say politically that I'm on the left side. And yeah, there's definitely nuance to that description, but just for that purpose, I'm pretty far over on the left, I think.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I live in Alameda, California, and I consider myself to be more on the right side. I was on the left side until the massacre of children at Waco, Texas, under the Clinton administration, where they burned them all up and using tanks and everything else. So that kind of switched my political perspective a bit.
And thank you, Jessica. Megan, live in Chico, California as well, and I guess kind of more on the left, like anarchist, but like humanist. I don't know. We do this every time and always say something slightly differently. All right. So to start, I guess, since you picked the topic for tonight, Jessica, would you like to start by choosing who you'd like to speak to and sharing on the topic?
Sure. I can start with you, if that's all
Okay,
right.
I'm listening. And
Okay.
if, Lauren, if you want to mute yourself when you're not talking or reflecting, that helps in case there's any background noise. Sorry, Jessica.
Okay.
Okay. Crime to me is, there are different levels, of course. There's like the level of where you shoplift, which probably means you should probably do some restitution and maybe some community service. And there's a type where you shoplift and then you pistol whip the clerk because you want to get away. And that's a different level of crime. And it goes on up to the ladder to pure-blooded cold murder, crimes of passion, armed robbery, all different types of crimes. And I believe under our current justice system, even though it's extremely flawed, we still have the right to a trial by jury. We have the right to due process. We have the right to our property being secured and not being unlawfully searched under the 14th Amendment. I think it's the 4th, I get them all mixed up, but anyway, the right to your property and not be, you have to get a warrant to search someone's property, even their driveway. And when you stop a car, you have to state why you're stopping. If the policeman stops the car, he has to state why he's stopping the car. And you have the right to say to the police officer, if he keeps badgering you or wants to search a car, etc., you ask if you're under arrest. And that way the police officer has to do a different type of thing, which can go into different details about it.
Can I reflect that what you said so far? Okay. Oh, also, David, I think, are you keeping time? I don't know. I'm just going to reflect what you said. We'll be fine. So what I heard is that you think that there are different levels of crime and like down from like petty theft that people should do some community service or something up to more violent crimes all the way up to murder, and that the consequence or the punishment for things should fit the severity of the crime. And then you also think it's important that we like know our rights, like trial by jury, due process, not not being detained without reason, not being searched without a warrant. Did I get it?
Yeah, that about covers it.
Okay, do you want to say more?
Not right now, maybe later. So I guess I'll talk to Lauren. Do I have your name right?
I think we usually just try to talk to one person each time. Like next time, if it comes back to you, then you could speak to Lauren.
All right, so it's your turn to pick. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank
more you want to say?
No, for right now, that's all I want to say.
Okay. All right, I will speak to David.
Okay, I'm listening.
So for me, when it comes to the topic of crime, one thing that is important for me is to recognize that it feels like a really complicated topic, I guess, because a crime is a crime because it's against the law. And, in different times and places, there are different things that are legal or illegal. And then people might argue about whether or not a specific law is moral or immoral, or like ethical or unethical. And there's also issues of how the laws are made, who's making the law, how.
Can I repeat
Yeah.
back what you said? Okay, you said on the topic of crime that it is a complicated subject, and that generally what makes something a crime is someone doing something that is against the law. And the law can vary from place to place. And also to take into account that like there can be questions on like who makes the laws, and who makes what laws, whether or not they're ethical or not. and I guess how they're carried out.
Well, I didn't say the last part, but yeah, everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel
When I say like who makes laws, I don't necessarily mean like this or that person, but like
the process?
is it one person, you know, in a dictatorship, or is it an oligarchy, or is it a democracy, you know, and then what
Okay.
kind of democracy, how effective is the democracy?
Questions
Yeah.
of what is the process of laws coming to be?
Yeah.
One person or group consensus or whatever.
Yeah. And that being so, a lot of times when people talk about crime, I feel kind of uncomfortable because it feels like it's like not acknowledging or it's not questioning like there's some things that are like illegal that I don't think should be. I mean, that's probably true for everyone. And it feels like there's just this unquestioned assumption sometimes from some people that like, oh, if it's illegal, then it's wrong. However, that being said, so I would like to us to question this more. That being said, it's hard. I was thinking about this before this call, and it's really hard for me to find another way to frame it. In some leftist circles, as you might be aware, if you from your internet participation, there's a lot of talk about harm and not causing harm. However, I've have issues with this because I see that everything we do causes harm. Like there's some harm to everything we can possibly do. It's like impossible to live without potentially causing some harm. I'll stop there.
Okay, so you started out by saying that you have some trouble balancing or coming to terms with, like, just because something is against the law, does that make it bad? And there's some laws that you don't agree with, and that there's also a question of harm that's been brought up, and that you feel that people shouldn't do harm, but the simple fact is that we all do things that harm others. Sorry, I'm a little vague. I kind of
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll just use another minute or so to explain that.
you got a minute and a
Or say
half.
more about that. That what I've seen with the discourse within leftist circles about not causing harm is that what ends up happening is of like who's causing harm and who's standing up against that harm instead of like problem solving together.
Okay, so you said in leftist circles in particular that there's issues of who is causing harm and who is standing up against those who are causing harm, and you think it'd be perhaps more productive if there was more mutual problem solving between the two groups,
Yeah.
or all parties involved, or
Yeah,
whatever.
all parties involved.
Yeah.
All right. That's sort of my dipping my toes in the water of this topic. So
Okay.
I will end there.
All right. So, Lauren, can you hear me? You're muted, though.
You're muted.
Yep. Okay.
So, I'll pick you to. Have you done a circle before?
Not exactly this, but I've done other empathy circles of different forums.
Okay, so you kind of get the process, right? Because I'm going to pick you to reflect back to me, and then it's going to be your turn.
Yep.
Okay. So I was thinking about this not too much beforehand, because it's not good for me to overthink things. You know, I try to keep things organic. And as other people were talking before it was my turn, it made me think about what I've come to conceive as the difference between legal law, there's legal law, and then there's the moral law. And sometimes they intersect, but not always. And that legal law is basically laws set in stone that a society enforces to keep things running better. Doesn't even necessarily have to be right or wrong. It harms society. And I think there's moral law. Like there's some things that you can do that's really evil that's not against the law. Like you can cheat on your partner. You can leave your children. You can just be a crappy person, but that's not against the law. But you are breaking a moral law, I think. And I think everyone, a discussion that should happen is like, what is the collective understanding of moral law with legal law and understanding the difference between the two?
Shall I reflect?
Yeah.
So you were saying that you didn't really spend a lot of time ahead thinking about this, but as the circle began, you were gathering some thoughts about there's two aspects of law: the legal law, the ones that are written in the book,
You're kind of breaking up.
that are enforced by law or society. Oh no. Is it any better if I move a little bit?
I think the problem happens when you move the camera around. I think your connection might be slightly slow or something, and it might jam up your bandwidth. This is a suggestion, because it seemed like whenever it moved, you started to stutter.
So if I keep it still?
Yeah, I'm guessing. Hopefully that'll work.
Okay. I hope that works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was hearing about the distinction you were making about legal and ethical or moral law. And that there's some things that are not technically illegal, but that are morally a problem or harmful, like cheating on someone or abandoning children possibly, or other examples like that, and that you want to kind of look at or have people be aware about how those things relate to each other.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
All right, that's about it on that, and that has helped me make sense of things. And I think a problem is, I think a lot of people, particularly on the left, want to combine the two. Like they want to legally force people to be decent people, which that's not really going to work. And I think in the past, we had lawmen, but we also had like church and spiritual leaders that helped us. And I think like the spiritual leaders would help us, in the moral law sense, in their eyes, be right with God or whatever. But it doesn't, and then, but still, you need to pay the tax man and get, and like not speed on the road, whatever. And because I do think that's a balance, but if you try to put them all together, you're giving the government too much power, and you can't force people by gun to be a decent person. That's not going to work.
So you were saying that you think the left tries to put those things together to have moral behavior be legally enforced, and that that doesn't work. And maybe in the past, or even in other ways, about there's a church or other kind of religious or spiritual community that people can answer to when it comes to moral behavior, and that shouldn't really overlap so much with things that maybe the state should handle, like traffic tickets or that type of thing.
Yeah, generally. There's more I would like to say, but but I think that's a good stopping point. I'm about out of time. So now it's thanks for repeating back what I said, and it's your turn, Lauren.
Okay, and then just to make sure, how do I track the time when this?
You could even
Oh,
track. I'm keeping time.
Okay,
And I'll let you know. I'll flash my phone against the screen whenever time is running out.
all right, sounds good. So I haven't really prepared ahead either for the topic, but
If you could start by just picking someone to speak to,
yeah, let's
it could be
see.
anyone.
How
It doesn't
about
have to go in order.
that?
Hello? I didn't hear what she said. Everybody's kind of frozen.
Mason.
Yeah, you're breaking up. It seems like your connection kind of goes in and out. You're on mute, Megan. Hello?
Hello.
Okay. So did you just restart or something?
Lauren, you could try turning your video off. I know it kind of sacrifices some connection, but it could help with the broadband or whatever. What's the word?
Shouldn't you mean me?
Yeah, you
anyone?
could turn your video off.
Yes.
I mean, it might help.
The connection is. Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
we can hear your voice better now.
Okay. Yeah, I just cut my video. So I need to pick a person. And is there anything about the order, or does it matter?
Just to kind of try to keep it moving around, but
we can mix up a little bit, but like don't go back and forth too much because everyone should have a chance. But yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll start with David.
Okay. I'll start the time now.
Okay, thanks. So not having thought ahead about this, but just in terms of punishment as part of the topic, crime and punishment. One issue that comes up for me is the idea of punishment as being an effective or the most overall integrated way of dealing with crime. And I guess when I say crime, I'm thinking just of something that's harmful, that's defined by law or society as harmful, and the way to deal with it is by punishment, because that's the kind of justice system we have. And I have concerns about a punitive justice system.
Okay, I'm going to repeat back that. All right. You said you didn't think ahead on this topic, so you're just kind of going by the cuff or whatever the saying goes.
Yeah.
That that you wanted to talk more about the punishment aspect of stuff, and and how that is assumed to be an effective way of upholding the law, and that yeah, it seems like you're generally questioning that, like that our system is set up, using punishment as a way of keeping people from breaking the law.
Yes, thank you. And that's just what I gravitated to start out anyhow. And I realize that it comes down to a question of kind of human behavior and human motivation, and our theories about what is effective. And I do think there's a place for certain type of behaviorism, you know, where it's like maybe you give someone a bad experience and then they don't do the thing you don't want them to do anymore. But I still think there's a lot of concerns about punishment in general that this could be a whole topic unto itself. But I just wanted to raise that as a general kind of question to explore.
Okay. So it seems that you sort of just reiterating what you said last time, that it seems that we are fixated on the idea that punishment helps alter the behavior as far as you know, following the law is concerned, and that you would like to focus on the punishment aspect. It could be a topic into itself about how it's administered and the philosophy behind that, perhaps.
Yeah, I do. I think it's important to know the reasoning behind choosing certain responses to, let's say, harmful behavior, and not to just assume that punishment is the most effective way to go for humans.
Okay, so you said that you think it's important not necessarily rely on punishment as far as addressing people who cause harm, and that it should be brought up about there could be more effective ways of going about doing it, perhaps.
That's pretty close. There's just kind of the idea that I really want to understand the reasoning behind choosing how to respond to harmful behavior. And I think because it's kind of the default in our society for a lot of things, that it would benefit us to kind of step back from that automatic kind of response and look at what is the most effective way to deal with harmful behavior.
So you just wanted to focus in on the reasoning behind what methods are implemented with punishment.
Yeah.
Is that about it?
Yeah.
Something, but I don't know.
And to allow for more other options besides the punitive response.
There should be a discussion about other options besides the punitive response.
Yeah, I would like that. Yes.
So you're about almost out of time. You got like 5 seconds. If you.
Okay. Well, I think that's good for now.
All right.
So thank you.
All right. So I guess I'll talk to Jessica.
Okay. So I was thinking about the whole situation of laws, basically. I think we have too many laws.
Jessica.
Hello.
You're going to reflect after me because it's my turn.
Oh,
And then it's your turn.
I always get mixed up with this, so you have to remind me. Thank
We
you.
all like to talk. Trust me. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just messing with you. All right. Yeah. So let's address. I guess I could address punishment. I've spent a lot of time around criminals, and I don't have a lot of sympathy towards them. And I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, like there's a clear distinction between what's law-abiding citizen and who's a criminal. I'm just talking about just the criminal mindset altogether. And it's usually kind of based on being able to get away with whatever you could possibly get away with to get what you want. I feel like that's the essence of the criminal mind.
You just said that you spent a lot of time around criminals, and you don't have much sympathy for a lot of them, and you're generalizing at some point, but because there's always exceptions. Is that what you were saying?
Oh, I didn't know there's not a clear line between they're
Yeah.
not different breeds, so to speak. But I understand the criminal frame of mind, and it is kind of a distinct one. There's different degrees.
And the general criminal mind is basically like it's sort of like the law of the jungle. If you get what you what you think you can get out of somebody,
You
by any means necessary, basically.
get away with whatever you can get away with.
Yeah, by any means necessary, or whatever you can get away with.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And sometimes there's issues like prison makes people worse. I mean, sometimes you can go in kind of bad and you come out even freaking worse. But we live in an imperfect world, and what are we supposed to do, really? Because I've been through a lot of rehabilitative type stuff, and I kind of know how those programs work. And if you are unwilling to change, you can work the system if people are just trying to change you. So sometimes just straight up something that harms you is the only thing that's going to deter you from doing things that possibly harm others in society as a whole.
So I think the first part you were saying that you're not sure that punishment or that prison makes people better, but what other choice is there in a way? Because all the rehab that you've seen, you've been through some rehab yourself, and you've seen people who go through rehab and they're just sort of pretending to go along with it so they can get out or game the system, and it doesn't always help really people who are determined to carry on their old ways.
Yeah. And I think that that prison is full of sad stories, and but that should be no reason to address the actions that someone does. I think no matter where you came from, what the situation is, you are still responsible for your actions. And I think that's very important.
Prison has,
people get lost in that, and they were like, well, you don't see that this A, B, and C happened, and so they did D. I'm like, well, D still happened, so it has to be acknowledged.
There's a lot of sad stories in prison, but that doesn't mean you should not take responsibility for what you did. If you do something bad or harmful to other people, you need to have a responsibility for that, and not just be able to kind of blow it off and go on with your life.
Yeah. And it seems like I'm assuming we're all somewhat reasonable here, but I mean, there's a very dysfunctional fad of people just wearing straight up t-shirts and stuff that says "fuck the police" and stuff. And I think it's very unenlightened to look at that, because I've said this before in these circles, and I guess I'll say it again, that I don't think people realize that police keep bad people safe as well. Sometimes I wish the police would go, and just clean house. I mean, that sounds bad, but an order will establish whether it's police or not. That's just the natural order of things. And so what would you rather deal with, police or someone that would just shoot you in the face if you look at them in the wrong way, just not to take a chance at them? I think people are kind of crazy. And I think police, though imperfect, do a pretty good job at trying to keep the peace.
You said that the people here are pretty reasonable people, but you've seen some really nutty, crazy people, or just maybe, well, you didn't say that, but they're probably stupid also, wearing F the police t-shirts and what they don't realize that the police also keep bad people from harm. Like there are lots of crazy people who would just shoot you in the face, but if it weren't for the police officer out there, they might be protecting that person who might be bad or good that was going to get shot in the face.
Yeah, that I think just because, yeah, I feel heard. Yeah, it's the way I look at it. Like, and I think there's things to be brought up. I think I've never I've never been outside of the United States, but I'm assuming there's other places that are not as multicultural as this place. And I mean, I grew up in a more rural kind of a monocultural type environment, but now I live in like a very multicultural metropolitan, and different cultures have different values, you know. So different groups of people have different ideas of what is the correct way to behave in society. So I see a lot of madness in law. Really, only, I mean, single unified law force is the only thing that keeps the tribalism at bay, especially when you have like a lot of different kinds of people together in the same public sphere.
You basically said that when you live in a multicultural society, a lot of people have different values. Some group might have a different value than the other group, and it's good to have a unified system of law and law enforcement to keep people behaving civilly towards each other, no matter even if they do share different values.
Basically, yeah, that's all the time I have.
So I pick somebody now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pick Megan.
Okay, I'm listening.
I was starting that when I was going to talk before. I really feel we have too many laws right now. Like I've heard it reported that every day we break some kind of law. If there was somebody watching us, they would say, "Oh, that's against the law," and that could be used against you if you get into a situation where your civil authority might be corrupt. They could watch you night and day to see if you broke a law and then throw you in jail. So I think it's important to have law, but just making laws about everything, it's really dysfunctional for the whole society and could lead to corruption and putting your political enemies or your people you just don't like because maybe they looked at your wife the wrong way or your husband or something into a legal situation, which they could actually prosecute if it's a law. So that's one of the things I think about sometimes.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you think there are too many laws these days, and that you've heard that like everyone actually breaks at least one law every day because there's so many things that are illegal, and you think that that's not a good idea because then it could kind of be used like it's not a good situation because it could be used against people politically. If everyone's breaking a law every day, then someone has to do to use it against you, like politically, or like, I don't know, I think, yeah, like in a divorce or like some kind of like lawsuit is just like be like watching you and find all these laws you've broken to use against you, but like really everyone else is doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. So I think there needs to be a discussion among people and among the people in the civil authority about how do we get rid of some of these ridiculous laws. I mean, I'm not even sure what some of them are. I know each state has its own laws. So I know in Oklahoma you can carry a concealed weapon without a permit. But if somebody here came with that, they wouldn't know. If they didn't know about the California law, they could possibly have a felony charge against them if they did that.
Okay, so you'd like to see more of a discussion between like all citizens and the leaders about how to deal with that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And also you're saying that it could lead to confusion and like people breaking laws unintentionally, like if they're not aware that it's different in one area than another.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yes. And then as far as punishment goes, that's a difficult one also because you can put people into rehabilitation under the care of like psychologists and blah, blah, blah. But who knows what agenda these people have? They could just keep you in there forever saying, oh, he's not ready yet, or she's not ready yet. We need to give her more medicine, put her through more stuff. And you could just stay in there until you're dead. Whereas if you just had a regular system where you're tried by a jury of your peers, they might say, okay, 3 years. So that can go both ways.
Okay, so you're saying that you are unsure about like the punishment issue because you could see it being helpful for people to have like rehabilitation programs, but you could also see it being abused. And like if somebody is put into like mental health care or something instead of a punishment, that the psychologist or whoever's treating them might just say, well, they're not ready, like they haven't, they're not showing signs of like having recognized their mistakes yet, and it could just go on forever instead of just like a clear-cut sentence.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the whole movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is about. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest you watch it. That's all I have to say about it right now.
Mm-hmm. So like this is such a theme of like mental health systems, people who are like criminalized having been shunted into a mental health system and that like being abused has been such an issue that there was like a whole book and movie about it, and it showed up in like stories.
Yes.
Right. So if you're done, then I will speak to Lauren, and you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
All right. So there's a couple of things that are coming up for me. First of all, I guess I just want to talk about the whole idea of like having a civil authority. And like I definitely hear what David's saying about like, well, if there's no civil authority, then it's just chaos and tribalism. However, okay, so I'm not sure, like I have some big questions about all that, like about, like the framing of like a civil authority and like the structure. But okay, let's say that we have one. Let's say that that's a good idea and that we have this civil authority that like keeps the peace or whatever, and that the power is vested in them by the government, which if it's a democracy is then by the people. So ultimately it's supposed to be fair because of all that. Then like it seems to me then ostensibly it's like these people, I guess if that's what the cops are, then they are like public servants or public leaders or whatever. And I was just hearing someone say this at the city council meeting here last week, is like they need to be receptive to feedback from people who are like in a way their constituency. Like if we're going to have that system at all, then those people need to be open to feedback. And I don't see that at all from police. Like I do not see that they are like receptive to feedback. I'll pause there.
Okay. So I'm hearing that this is kind of bringing up various things, including the issue of a civil authority. And that that's a big subject, but assuming for the moment that it's a good idea that the people in civil authority have been chosen by, and power has been invested in them by somebody. In a democracy, it's by the people. And so if that's going to work, they need to be receptive to feedback. And and that's partly specifically an example out of the city council meeting that you watched, and that you have the impression that they're not receptive, or you see a lot of examples of people in civil authority not being receptive to feedback at all.
Yeah. I like the example given actually. I was like watching the city council meeting here in our town. It's live streamed. And I was watching it last night, and someone I know actually, was speaking about how, so the chief of police here has gotten a lot of criticism for some things that have happened under his watch. And I guess somebody, I don't even know, like somebody was calling it like personal attacks, like saying that he was receiving personal attacks. And then somebody got up and spoke and said, like, this is a public leader. This is not a personal attack. Like, I am giving, like, they didn't say it this way exactly, but they were basically like saying, it's not a personal attack. Like, I'm critiquing how someone is doing their job for the government that is supposedly democratically elected. Like, we elect our city council members and they make contracts with the police. So they work for us. And it's like, but they're not listening to feedback. It's like they think that they're their own little mafia. And they even have like packs where they like send out flyers telling people who they should vote for, which is like a huge conflict of interest.
So it sounds like one example is of how the chief of police has had a lot of criticism, and somebody at the meeting said that, kind of characterized it as a personal attack on that chief. And then it was pointed out that it's not a personal attack, it's a critique of someone's professional position of how he's doing his job as an elected or chosen by the councilors who are elected. So yeah. It's a different scenario, and that instead the people in that position are acting as if they're only accountable to each other. I think you said like a little mafia. And, they'll do things like tell people who they should vote for, and other conflict of interest kind of actions.
Yeah. How am I doing on time, David?
You got 30 seconds, but I mean, if you really have something to say, I'll let you go over a little bit.
No, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Just I'll say that I was actually recently in a class, we had some police guests speaking, and they openly admitted that they support conservative candidates. So
you had an actual experience of people in person, of police in person, acknowledging that they support conservative candidates.
Yeah. So that's my time. Thank you. So you could pick who you want to speak to now.
Okay. How about Jessica?
Hi. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just pausing for a second to kind of see what coalesces in my thoughts. But yeah, I think what comes up for me is the issue of public discourse, and that the example of seeing it as a personal attack when a system is being critiqued, a system that we put into place to help manage society. I think any system needs to be open to feedback, because otherwise they don't have the information that they need to be effective. Maybe at the beginning they have the information, but as time passes, things change. And so that's just an ongoing process for any organization. And So on all sides, if people perceive a critique as being personal, that seems to interfere with the effective functioning of that system. I'll pause there.
Okay, you were saying that our public officials or civil authorities need to be receptive to feedback from the constituents and not take it as a personal attack, and be more objective in how they receive their information or their criticisms, because always thinking of it as a personal attack sort of puts a real big wrench in the whole rapport or trust between the citizens and the authorities, and that doesn't work in organizations or in government.
Yeah, and not just maybe the authorities themselves, but their supporters. Like if it's somebody else, supporter of an official saying, "Oh, you're criticizing, you're personally attacking this official," when the person might be trying to critique how their job is performed for functional reasons. I'm wondering what's going on in our society that people don't know the difference, or that there's some confusion about that.
Yeah, I think what you were saying is that partisans of that particular official also need to be able to accept that there are people who may not share their view on that particular person, and not try to make people feel uncomfortable, I guess. I mean, you didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking that the feeling of that person might be in criticizing the official.
Yeah, I'm imagining that it would be more useful if people could tell the difference between something that is attacking as opposed to critiquing or giving feedback, asking for change, or asking for accountability, or whatever it's about.
Yeah, that people have to be more open into telling the difference between attacking someone and just critiquing their performance, the way they handle their duties.
Yeah, and so I guess this circles back around to the challenges of having law enforcement or civil authorities, that they part of the feedback, I suppose, would be being accountable to their constituents. And if there isn't if there aren't channels set up for them to receive that feedback, then they might end up doing things that are unproductive to the cause. And then that's where people like on the left might get angry and start to think like, oh, they're all, all cops are bad or something like that, because of the lack of openness to or of dialogue with the citizens.
So it would be, you're saying that it would be beneficial for the community to be able to have a channel or a place where they can give positive or negative feedback to the authorities. That would make them able to do their job, and the community would be more supportive if they felt they were being heard.
Yeah, that there might be more trust of the original intention of having law enforcement, like imagine things like for safety and security and order, that those are the reasons for having it, or some reasons, and then it would make that more possible for the law enforcement to fill its function.
You were saying
if they got more feedback. Yeah,
that the feedback would in reality be able to help law enforcement to do their job properly, and which is safety, the different types of functions we expect them to do it properly and reasonably.
Yeah. So that's,
If you
and I
could,
guess, oh, what's that?
your 6 minutes is up. You can wrap
Okay.
finishing thought, and that's all.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was more imagining then how it comes into kind of justice systems, but that's a whole other area. So I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pick David.
Okay, I'm listening.
I just wanted to say that, yeah, it's very complicated, the whole situation between law enforcement, the community. I mean, there are people, especially in certain areas where the crime rates are really high, that they're afraid to step out of their doors sometimes, or send their kids to school or whatever. And law enforcement generally is kind of tentative about keeping the people safe there, because then they might have to interact with and have even violent interactions with drug dealers, human traffickers, and people like that. So these people are kind of at the mercy of the gangs in a way. So it's a big breakdown between the community and the civil authorities as far as safety goes in a lot of our cities.
Okay, you said in a lot of our cities that that this subject is kind of complicated as far as the population and the civil authorities, and but on one hand, you have people who might live in not so great neighborhoods that are scared to leave their house due to lots of illegal activity going on and predatory activity going on, and there are risks of violence all the time, and that the civil authorities are in theory there to help keep those people safe.
Yes, but they're hesitant to actually step into it, and until they get a call like, oh, somebody's been shot, or somebody broke into my house, instead of just trying to like maybe be out on the street and keep their eyes on people and make sure they get to school safely, that they can go out at night and get a gallon of milk from the store. But that might involve some violent interactions between the police and some of these criminal gangs. And then that gets in the court and the papers. And, the police officer practically has to have an attorney right there next to him, as well as his video cam, to make sure he did everything correctly. And sometimes in these confrontational situations, you don't even have a couple of seconds to make sure you're going to walk out of there alive. So I think it's pretty difficult for the law-abiding people and the police officers.
Okay, you said that there are, some areas more dangerous than others, and that the police could just sit back and only come to calls when people call, like they're in trouble or someone's breaking in a house, or they can actually be there on foot. It's their presence be there all the time, so people can feel safe about going about their activity, legal activity, as opposed to people, that be more in the underworld, so to speak, and that in this process there's going to be conflict that happens, and whatever conflict seems to be projected out into the media or whatever, and the police officer basically needs to have a camera on him and maybe an attorney with him to make sure he does everything right. And sometimes you only have a split second to make a call or make a decision, because things can get fatal very quickly if not.
Yes. That's about all I have to say right now.
Okay. All right, I'll pick Megan.
Okay.
Okay. I was thinking as other people were talking, especially about like the general public engaging the civil authorities, and how some they view that as a personal attack or whatever. And as with anything, I'd have to see it on, instance on a I have to see a particular instance, and how it went down. I know a lot of times, a lot of people can be very, when they're mad, be very vitriolic, especially in a public setting, to elect to officials that have a job to hold on to, and they are being attacked, disrespectfully. And I think the officers or whoever the elected authority is, they're human as well, and they feel that. But the person lashing out at them is not going to lose their job for lashing out at them, but they will lose their job if they return with an equally human response. So I like to encourage people to kind of remember that we are all human.
Okay, so you're saying that as far as like what is considered a personal attack or not, that for what you would consider that, you would want to see on a case by case basis, like what someone actually said, to see whether you think it is that or not. And that that people, when it comes to like public issues, can get really vitriolic towards like public employees, for lack of a better word. And that you just want people to remember that they're human too, and that while the average citizen isn't going to get fired from a job for like speaking against them really harshly, that if the person hearing that speaks back in that way, that they might lose their job. And so you'd like some more like humanizing of the people in those positions.
Yes. Generally, I think when dealing with unstable situations, it's best to be as professional and unemotional as possible. But I'm human and I make mistakes as well. But on a general notes, it's nice if if you want respect, you have to show respect a lot of times, and that can even translate out in a case where you're either speaking with a civil authority or you're actually in an instance with a civil authority, that though you're not going to get off for what you did, things generally go better if you're respectful to the person. This is not always the case. There are officers out there that are just assholes and will abuse you just because they're assholes. But on a general note, most of the cops, I think, are just trying to do their job, and they want to be treated with respect, and they will work with you more if you treat them with respect.
So you're saying that in unstable situations, that being professional and respectful is generally helpful, and that while there might be some exceptions, that generally if you're like, you think if people are in trouble for committing a crime or something, if they're respectful, that things might go better for them. Like they might, it's not like they're going to get away with it necessarily, but that things might be smoother for them, and that those like police officers want to be treated with respect as much as everyone.
Yeah. And as far as just like the general population, like engaging the civil authorities and kind of dictating which directions they go in.
You're glitching a little.
Am I? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's I think it's okay now.
Okay. As far as addressing the issue of like the population or the citizens addressing civil authorities and dictating what directions they go in or how they did one thing or another, and how the civil authorities tend to back each other up. I like to give an example that helps me keep things in context. Say you got a household and you got say you got like a mother and father, and say you got 4 children. That in that household, it's not a democracy. What mom and dad say goes, even if the 4 children want to stay up to 2 in the morning and eat candy all night long. that what the mom and dad say goes, and and I think that's the first instance of authority that a lot of us are exposed to. And of course, nowadays there's a lot of broken homes and stuff. There's a lot of bad parents out there that might cause a person to distrust authority deeply. I think that's part of the issue as well. But to address like the bigger group of people dictating what the smaller police force should do, I think they should, part of their job is to have authority. Their job does not work if they don't have authority. So, yeah, it's one thing to keep in mind when addressing them and trying to push them around, that they're not going to, they're going to have each other's back, just like mom would have dad's back, and vice versa.
Okay. You might want to adjust your mic a little, but I think I got most of what you were saying. It was just a little hard, but you were saying that a lot of people's first exposure to any type of authority is within their family, and that within a family, that it's not a democracy. If like two parents are telling their kids something, even if there's 4 kids that outnumber them, it doesn't mean the kids decide what's happening. And that you think that the same kind of goes for like a civil authority, that if the majority of people can tell the smaller people who are like in that position what to do, then they don't actually have authority. And then you're also saying, though, that about the family metaphor, that like maybe a lot of people's bad experiences with their parents give them their first exposure to authority is bad or like traumatic, and then it gives them a bad impression of authority in general.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to keep the mic closer. It's a funky setup I have here. And
is there anything more?
My time's up.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess I'll bring it back around to Lauren. You're muted.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because the topic is crime and punishment, but I'm finding that I have a lot to say about police, which is related. One thing I want to talk about is, and I notice I feel really like frustrated as I bring this up. Like, I wish that there was more receptivity to this feedback from actual police institutions. Actually, I want to say something about what David was just saying. It feels kind of contradictory to me to say, oh, well, we have to have a civil authority because otherwise there's just like tribalism, and whichever group is the strongest is going to just be in charge. But then say also that like that civil authority, like, I mean, maybe this isn't exactly what David's saying, but it kind of sounds like he's saying like it shouldn't really be that beholden to the public. And in which case I'm like, well, then how is it even different from general, like, might makes right? And that's, I think, how a lot of people feel about the police, like that they're not a civil authority, that they are just like this gang, basically.
I'm hearing that some frustration is coming up for you around this subject area, and that in terms of what David was talking about or had been saying about civil authority is there to kind of be a better alternative than tribalism and might makes right and gangs, but that if they're not accountable to the public, then it seems like they end up behaving similarly, or at least that's what a lot of people experience, that civil authority is exerting might makes right, just like gangs would.
Yeah. And I think that, like, like a lot of people maybe just don't experience this because there's a lot of, I was going to bring up like asymmetry of the application of laws. Laws are applied to different people in different ways based on how they look. Like, this is obviously a huge issue, profiling and bias, which is constantly denied by police officers and police forces, saying that they don't have any bias, even though, anyway, even though I think there's a lot of evidence showing that everyone has bias, and saying that you don't is just like ignorant. So like an example of the asymmetry of application of laws is like in Chico, we have a sit-lie ordinance where it's against the law to like sit on the ground, like on the sidewalk downtown, because people didn't like that there's like so many homeless people downtown sitting on corners and on streets asking for money. However, it seems to me, like my general impression, that if someone is like has dirty clothes on and a backpack with all their possessions and looks like ungroomed and they're sitting on the ground, they are much more likely to be harassed by police than I am if I sit on the ground looking clean in clean clothes with no backpack or just a school backpack and not looking homeless. So that's an example of laws not being applied evenly.
Yeah, so in terms of how laws are applied, there's a lot of asymmetry, and that it can vary depending on people's appearance and other factors. And so the police might deny that is happening, that they might say they have no bias, but in fact, it's shown that everybody has bias. It's kind of part of the human mind. And so the result is that maybe the bias affects how the laws are applied. And an example is in Chico, there's a sit-lie ordinance, but it's much more likely to be enforced if somebody has the appearance of a homeless person, especially, looking ungroomed or with dirty clothes and a big backpack with all their stuff in it, instead of somebody who looks clean and doesn't have a big backpack. So that would be an example of the asymmetry of law enforcement.
Yeah. Like, it's just an excuse to bother homeless people, basically.
Mm-hmm. So the law itself becomes an excuse to bother, or it's targeted towards bothering homeless people rather than applied evenly to all people in Chico.
Yeah. So that's my time. Thank you.
So then, are we trying to kind of switch around who we talk to, or?
You can if you want.
Because I'm, all right. And I think I'm going to pick David again.
Okay, I'm listening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks. Let's see. I was having a thought about something that you were saying before, as far as it's kind of lost, but let's see if I can come back towards it with maybe just the concern about lawlessness, or maybe also kind of I'm hearing something about the valuing of authority and having structures that support authority. And so I find that's a really fascinating topic, because on the one hand, I really value everybody treating each other with respect and care. And at the same time, I also think there is a place for different levels of authority in different situations and different ways of organizing social groups of people, whether it's a nuclear family or a larger group. So it's kind of tricky, because those structures can both be really helpful, but also can, I see problems that come up with them too. So I don't know what the optimal situation actually looks like, or if there is one single way that makes the most sense for people to organize themselves.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you were responding to me saying something about respecting authority or having a need to have an authority. And you said that on one hand, you feel like every person should treat each other with respect. On the other hand, you think that police, perhaps, or authorities should control or structure, somehow work with the structure of people, whether it be a nuclear family or a larger group, and that you see the need for that, but there's obviously a lot of problems that arise in this balance, so to speak.
Yeah, and so like one of the paradoxes I find is how does it look for people to be treated as equal in their humanness, but maybe different in their position sometimes, like especially with children and parents, or other adult authority figures, like how to treat them with full care and humanness, and really valuing their experience, while also not always letting them have the same amount of choice as an adult, for example.
Okay, so you said that how does, in the example of like maybe children and their parents, how do the parents treat them with the equal open humanness as a human being, but also kind of dictate what they do and be have authority at the same time?
Yeah, and I think the difficulty of that, the fact that that's hard for people to find that balance in childhood with their kids, or how kids are raised. If that balance is off, that ends up with a lot of the social problems that we have now.
Okay, so you said that I think you think a lot of difficulties arrive that in dealing with that dynamic of trying to treat them as humans, but also being a parent at the same time, can cause a lot of greater problems in society as a whole later on, perhaps.
Yeah, just more specifically, like when it comes to setting limits with young children, if that is done too harshly, then children internalize that and then grow up to maybe handle their own authority more harshly than is actually helpful to kind of the public goodwill.
Okay.
So then it causes more mistrust and competition and difficulty among people than necessary.
Okay, so your time's up, but I'll repeat that back.
Okay.
Um, so you said that, say in a situation where someone might have someone with dysfunctional parenting skills, that they could use that, grow up with the idea of perhaps a harmful, distorted sense of authority, and then they act on that as well with their own children or other people, perhaps, and the cycle kind of repeats itself.
Yeah, and just to clarify, not just on their own children, but like into larger social structures, like how some of our justice systems are structured or civil authorities are structured, might be damaged by that lack of balance from early life.
Yeah, that distorted connection to authority can not only be transmitted to their own children, but whatever other function they have in society that deals with authority can be equally as dysfunctional.
Yes, thanks.
All right, Jessica, are we putting you to sleep?
No, I'm still awake.
All right, just checking. You're all like checking your Facebook, and you're like, these people are. Anyway, all right. So I picked Jessica.
Okay.
All right. Where do I begin? I see people bringing up treating people as human and as equals, and I think human nature is not necessarily rooted in equality and fairness. I think it's sort of an abstract structure to try to keep things as fair as possible, but the natural flow of things are not equal. Things just happen.
You said you see people talking about everything being equal, and that human nature is not necessarily that's abstract. The whole idea of equality can be abstract, because in human nature there's so many variables, and not everything is always equal. And it's, what was the last part that you said?
That's about it, I think. All right. Yeah. I'm drawing a blank for some reason. Yeah, the equality is kind of an abstract, and I mean, I had a dysfunctional father, for instance. He cared about me, but he didn't. He was raised with a very violent father, and it was a different situation then. You know, he was in a poor neighborhood, and there was a lot of fighting and stuff at that time, and he was also an alcoholic, and he wanted to make me tough, but I was a little bit more sensitive, and it was a different time where people, society had changed a little bit, and instead of making me strong, he actually made me very neurotic and fearing him. But I could have easily took that, been imprinted with that, and just been another version of him, or instead I learned from that. And sure, might be a little dysfunctional because of that, but I also learned a little bit about human nature as well.
Or you were saying that your own father, you knew that your father loved you, but he had a very violent father himself, and he was also an alcoholic. So, and you lived in a bad neighborhood, a poor neighborhood, where there were lots of fights. So he made you kind of fearful of him and neurotic because he was pretty harsh, I would imagine, in the way he raised you.
Yeah.
But you didn't let that imprint you so much that today you're carrying it all around with you and acting out on it, even though you're sure that you have some effects from it.
And I also I think Megan was talking about like how people are treated differently by the way they look. And she did admit it herself that we all do have our unconscious bias. But I'd like to focus more on that we all have our bias. There's pattern recognition. It's a thing. We all profile each other. It's a part of survival. And I think people, especially in positions of authority, should in a quote unquote civil society, should act as professional as possible. I also think that they're not that they're not, nor they should not, be blind to their gut and say, I work at a grocery store and I see in the past, which is a true story, I used to be homeless, and so I can spot it a mile away if someone's going to go in there and steal something, and a lot of times it's how you carry yourself, how you dress. You obviously are not in there to buy something. You're in there to get what you can get and get out. I did not judge that person, but I also kept an eye on them, and I made sure, and I got angry with them if they did steal, and I got even more angry if they lied to me, because it was about respect, and that translates in my job or on the streets. You don't come, I viewed it as you coming into my home or my place and taking something of mine and disrespecting me, So there's that. So I was profiling people, but there's a reason for that. And I do not consider myself a bad person for doing so.
Yeah, you're basically saying that everybody has a bias, but also there are reasons for those biases sometimes. Where you worked, people would come into the place, and a lot of times you were able to tell what they were going to be doing by the way they looked, and you would keep an eye on them. And if they disrespect you, it's like they're coming into your house, and it would make you angry. First, you would be angry because they took something, and then you'd be even angry when they were disrespectful when you confronted them with their theft.
Yeah, okay, I got about 30 more seconds, but I like to go back to the moral law and legal law. And as far as that sit and lie thing that Megan brought up, that I don't think it's immoral for a person to sit on the sidewalk, but I also see the legal reason to keep people from doing that if there's a bad homeless problem, because that does cause problems. It does cause problems. Even though the person is just trying to rest, that person probably has been through a series of events that's led them to that point. And who's to judge them on their life choices but themselves? But due to the situation, they're going to get profiled and they're going to be dealt with if people are going to deal with that as in a healthy society. Because when you end up on the streets, you generally have nothing to offer the society. So why should the society offer something to you? But there should be a balance too for people to be able to exist when they're on hard times. So it's like, I justify the profiling, but also I don't believe in people condemning people as well, because people can change and should be given the chance to change. And that's all. My time's up.
You were just saying that you believe the profiling is not harmful in all cases, even though people do have a right to sit, but there might be a really bad homeless situation in that area, and it's the duty of the authorities to kind of keep an eye on it and keep it under control for the rest of the people who maybe have to walk up and down the sidewalk. But at the same time, people shouldn't just be punished or just totally discounted because everybody falls on hard times sometimes, or people can fall on hard times and they can change.
Okay, that was about it, but I just wanted to clarify that one point on a person or a group of people or someone who doesn't seem to be contributing to society. Those who are actively trying to contribute and be a good citizen are going to be resentful for that and will judge. And that's just any group. I'm sure even like Indian tribes did that. If you were a bum and you didn't hunt, they would probably shame you. So I mean, it is what it is. I think people shouldn't take things so personally. That's all. And my time's
Okay. Do I need to say anything back? Okay.
my time. I already went over a little bit, so
Okay. I'll pick Megan.
Okay.
It was interesting the way. Are you supposed to talk or me? I always forget.
I'm listening.
It was interesting in a way about the example you brought up about if you were sitting on the sidewalk and clean and everything else, the police might be less likely to bother you about sitting there. But if it was a dirty looking person with a backpack, they probably would confront that person. I'm sure there's bias involved in the whole situation, but there also might be some self-preservation going on there on the part of the police officer, because you're probably more likely to have an attorney and to sue the police department. And he's probably thinking about that. And as well as that the person with the backpack probably isn't going to be suing and will probably just move. So I was just trying to think how the police officer might be thinking.
Okay. So
It's as simple as it seems.
yeah. So you're just trying to imagine like why a police officer might not choose to say something to me if I was sitting on the sidewalk, and it might be because he thinks I might have an attorney and might like sue the police, whereas someone who looks like they don't have an attorney might just move. So it might be like a self-preservation thing for them.
Yes. So it's hard for everybody to put themselves in someone else's shoes. And I think it's hard for the police to put themselves in each person they encounter's shoe. And it's hard for that person they encounter to put themselves in the police officer's shoes. So, or maybe they don't even care about the police officer's shoes or vice versa. So it's a human problem. I think it's been around ever since people have been interacting with each other, and it's not likely to be solved totally. And I think it's worth people thinking about things and not just jumping to conclusions all the time on both sides.
Yeah. So the main idea that I heard is that this issue of being able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes is probably a human problem that's never going to be resolved fully. Like in the example of a police officer interacting with anyone, like another citizen, that both people might not really be able to or even want to put themselves in another person's shoes, but that it's worth thinking about and to try not to jump to conclusions on both sides of any interaction.
Yes. I mean, the encounters I've had with the police are a little bit scary. Not that they were going to beat me up or anything, but you always have to be aware that they have more authority than you do in that one encounter. So an officer was going to give me a $600 ticket for jaywalking, and I started crying. So he didn't give me the ticket because I explained to him the situation, that there had been people attacked on the way from work, and that I was trying to hurry up and get to the bus stop, and there was no traffic. It was a one-way street. He gave me a big lecture about crossing streets, and it was kind of, but he didn't give me a ticket. So I think he did empathy. And I was respectful to him too, also, because I know that he's doing his job. And he was thinking about safety. Like he mentioned a whole lot of statistics about how many people are getting killed because they just run across the street and blah, blah, blah. So,
yeah. So like you were saying, you've had some scary experiences with police, but it's like mixed. For example, you almost got a $600 ticket for jaywalking, but you started crying and explained to him why you're doing that. And he didn't give you the ticket, but he did seem like he was kind of having this intimidating energy, but you could tell that you're trying to respect that he's doing his job and that he cared about your safety, which you could tell because he was telling you about statistics about people dying from crossing the street. So it's like complicated.
Yes. I don't really have anything else to say. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So,
So you're feeling complete for now?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I will speak to David this time.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. It's interesting. I didn't really know what I wanted to say, and this is like totally just something popped in my head from what Jessica said. Uh, it kind of made me think about my own interactions with police and how my interactions with police have changed over the years. And it's um, and there's something that like I don't actually feel good about, which is like I'm not. I want to be clear that I'm not saying that I think Jessica was like trying to manipulate him, but I feel weird about the fact that sometimes you can like get out of trouble from like showing vulnerability. Like I think it's a good thing, that like you show vulnerability and then people are like, okay, like I see that why you did that. And so I'm going to be understanding. Like that's a good thing. But what I don't feel good about is that I think it's harder for some people to be vulnerable than others. Some people are more defensive, or it's harder, or that some people's vulnerability maybe wouldn't be taken as seriously. Like, I think, I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a little lost in what I'm saying, but I've thought a lot about how, like, I've done that too. Like, I've like broke down crying when I thought I was going to get in trouble. And it's not like I was like faking it, but I also felt kind of weird about it. Like, oh, like I'm getting out of trouble because I'm crying. And yeah,
Okay.
I don't feel like it's a complete thought, but I'll pause there.
I'll try to clean it up for you. Uh, um, I think you were saying you were listening to Jessica's story, and you kind of relate it with a instance that you've had yourself, and that you think it's in one way good that the police officer was able to empathize with Jessica when she opened up and showed that she was vulnerable. But on the other hand, you think it's kind of not. She was maybe being able to get away with something perhaps because she was vulnerable, or that I'm assuming that maybe some people can take that. Um, but you also said that um, that that might not be right, so to speak, because not all people are going to have the same disposition. They're not going to be able to be that vulnerable, or not naturally, or not so. And that you related it to your own experience where you've cried as well in front of police. And it's not that it was an act, that it was a sincere emotion, but then afterwards or during that you still kind of felt that something wasn't right, that, that police officer was showing mercy on you because you revealed your vulnerability.
Yeah. And it's not that like I want to like I think that the right thing is that I should have been punished. Like I don't. It's more that I guess it's more that I feel bad for the people who like um who don't like who don't have those experiences. Like, you know, like it's a relief to I mean, this thing with the police is really complicated, but just on as like a simple human interaction of like the way things are currently, it's a relief to think, oh, like I might be getting a ticket or going to jail and then not have that happen. It's a relief if that happens. Um, and I feel bad for the people who might be pretty much the same as me but for some reason they have that interaction and they end up getting the ticket, even though, like, but maybe the police just aren't as nice to them because, like, they're not female or something. I don't know. So they don't seem as vulnerable. And it's, yeah, I'll just stop there.
So you're generally saying that you kind of feel bad that there's not consistency in people's experiences with the police, perhaps by their disposition, and that some people are are not going to show vulnerability, so to speak, and that in one way you're kind of it gives you some relief to hear Jessica's story, showing that there's mercy out there. But on the other hand, it seems that we all should be equals, perhaps, and like maybe that police officer felt sorry for her because she was a vulnerable female acting vulnerable. But it seems like that it's something you were wrestling with. I think you got about like 30 seconds or something. I forgot to start it.
No, it's okay. I could stop there. I guess I just want to say that, like, I don't think, like, I'm not saying that, like, the solution to this discomfort that I feel is more people should be punished more often. Like, I'm not saying that.
So you're just like to end it saying that you don't think the solution is people should be punished more often. That's not what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. I'm done. I feel heard.
Okay, we're getting close to the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually, I guess it depends on if you or if anyone else wants to go, like, one more time. Usually it doesn't take, like, we said 7 to 9. It doesn't take 15 minutes to get feedback. It doesn't hardly even takes 10 usually. So we could probably do one more round.
All right, we'll see how it goes.
Or not like one more full round, but like,
A couple more turns, maybe.
yeah.
We'll see. All right, Lauren, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I wanted to use kind of an anecdotal, like a personal experience of the police to kind of. I could use a few and juxtapose them, but I really don't have time for that. But there's one instance, like I hate to bring up, sound like a broken record, but I bring up my time being homeless a lot because that's the most exposure I had to the police because I was in their sphere of influence constantly. And there was one instance where I was at this community art studio where for people to go and work on art and stuff, marketing out here. And I had just gotten high like an hour before that on speed, so I'm sure I looked pretty crazy looking. And yeah, I was very dirty or whatever. And there's this schizophrenic guy that I knew there that was very stressed out. So I decided to smoke some weed with him outside. We were right next to 6th Street here, which is really just crack central. And I was smoking some marijuana with him, in a sea of crackheads. And then the police came and started messing with us, in there.
So, you are bringing up the situation of having been homeless because it's given you the most exposure to the police that, out of all the different phases of your life. So, and then you were starting to describe a situation or an incident where you said something it glitched a little bit about an art center that you were you going to it or you were
I was there. It was a community art center.
Yeah. And we were at 6th Street and you had gotten high about an hour before on speed, and then you ran into a schizophrenic guy that and you offered him some weed because I guess he was kind of stressed out. And so then the police, amidst all the people using crack, the police focused on you.
Yeah, focused on me and the schizophrenic guy that I was smoking
Yeah.
with. Mainly me. All right, so I feel heard. And so he start asked the guy that I was with his name, and he just started repeating his social security number over and over and over again and other random things, and he just let him go. He was focused on me. And so I was very polite, with him, but that officer had me in his sights, and he pretty much made a whole public display out of me. He emptied out my contents of my backpack all over the place. There was some embarrassing things in there and stuff, and they hauled me up and threw me in jail. And there was all sorts of illicit activity going on then. I bring that up because I later realized what he did. That was his block. He probably already knew the guy that I was with. He's just some random wingnut. He's like, he knows his story, but he didn't know me. And and it was obvious that I was like homeless and probably, some kind of addict of some kind. And so he was basically running me through the system and seeing what was up with me is what he was doing. And he was very rude about it. And it wasn't fair, because I was just smoking weed in the midst of crack dealers and stuff. But he already knew what was going on. He knew these people are dealing crack, whatever. I was the one element he didn't know about. He wanted to check me out.
So what happened was that, they asked the other guy some questions, like his name and stuff, and he just kept saying his social security number over and over, and they just let him go. The cop was focused on you, and the way that you're framing it maybe is that that's what he was doing. This was his block, like his turf, and he knew all the other elements like that other guy, but he didn't know much about you. So he put you through the paces and kind of focused on you and made a display of you and had you take out all your stuff and then put you in jail. And this was his way of kind of processing you and like to get a handle on things.
Yeah. And so that was law applied unequally. But in a sense, I think that cop, though he was a jackass, he was, maintaining order the best way he could, perhaps. That's kind of a crazy part of town. When you're in the Wild West, you act like a gunslinger, I guess, and I've had several weird experiences with cops when I was in that situation. I had a group of cops once stop me and ran me through, and they actually pulled up that incidence from that possession charge I got from that one incident, and they said they could take me to jail, but they weren't going to take me to jail if I told them about myself. I told them some superficial story, then they wanted to know more about my past. Very unprofessional, So I sat there. I ended up talking to these cops for like an hour because I was in their territory again, another part of town, and it was under a bridge. There's lots of crazy tweakers out there, but they wanted to see me. And then he felt me up, and he like wanted to know like where I got my dope from. He's like whatever, and I just told him like around over there, whatever. And they wanted to see like what my story was, how to end up on the streets, why I was the way I was, and I ended up, I felt very violent, but they had me because they could easily take me in because I had a possession charge from before, but then they let me be, because I think he used his gut. He could tell that I guess I couldn't have made up the story that I told him, and I had nothing to lose at that time. So I told him the truth. And so when they drive around and they see me on, sleeping outside on the sidewalk, they know my story, or at least they think they do, so I think it's about order. It's not about right or wrong. It's about balance, so to speak. So yeah, that's just my takeaway from all that. And my time is up.
So you're saying that you realized or recognized that the first cop was doing his job. Like that's like a wild part of town, and when it's wild, you do what you have to do, and that's what it looked like in that situation. A way of maintaining order the best way that he knew how. And then later on, some other cops picked you up and because of that possession charge, they could have put you in jail again. And so you complied with them asking you all these questions going way beyond what you consider professional. But you went along with it. You also had nothing to lose anyway, so you told them the truth, and you figured that that actually made it more, it kind of, you didn't say this, but like it helped them with their job of keeping balance or order, because now they know your deal and they'll just leave you alone probably next time if they see you around. And overall, it's not about a question of right or wrong, but about balance and order.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So, where are we at now? It's almost time.
8 minutes. We have 8 minutes.
I was talking while I was muted. So yeah, I was saying we need to wrap up. So David will stop the recording and then restart it, because we like to have the like feedback. We do feedback as a separate recording.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm stopping this recording now.